Mr. Tory, welcome to the show. Do you think if the Leafs win a best-of-5 series, people will be in the streets of your city?
Well, we've been there before, haven't we now? I don't think so. I mean, because they're told they're not supposed to be in the streets, and because it's only one step on the way to that parade that if necessary, we'll call. I think I've mentioned it when I've been here before, which is if we have to have a one-car parade up Bay Street with no spectators, but that car has the Stanley Cup in it, no problem. We'll have a one-car parade.
Having sat through the Raptors parade, I'm all for it, Mayor Tory. I am all for.
Anyway, look, let's take this one step, one game at a time, and I think they were struggling when the season came to a stop, but I think they have the talent to do better, and this may give them a fresh start. So we'll see.
You've been wonderful with your time throughout this pandemic, and we appreciate you joining us again on the show. I have to ask you, did you think as of last week or in and about that time that the Jays were going to play games at home as we talk about them trying to find a new home?
I did, because I thought there was enough. I'll tell you what happened. I mean, I'm quite happy to tell you sort of what unfolded. The provincial government were the ones that were initially quite hesitant. Their medical officer of health, and I say this with no criticism whatsoever, and it did not include, by the way, the premier, who was positive about it. And I think the Jays and Major League Baseball and even some of the players appeared in front of the medical officers of health to say, look, we're serious about this. We take it seriously. And so the province came on side because they saw this 150-page protocol and realized that every step was going to be taken and that the players were serious about it. You know, they couldn't speak on behalf of the visiting players, but they said, look, who has more to lose than we do in the context of, our livelihood and the series, and we don't want to ruin the health of our own fans. So then the scene switched to Ottawa when the province came on side, and I think up there, they had a very genuine, concern about the whole coming and going thing. And when you started asking about hockey, and the hockey thing has got the teams coming to Toronto, staying here, anchoring themselves in a hotel, and basically going back and forth in a bus to the arena. Baseball was very different. Our team was coming and going. The visiting teams are coming and going, and I just think I called an unnamed minister on Saturday morning, and I said, so the Jays are kind of needing to hear just because they had to make a decision, and the minister in question said, well, we've been going back and forth on this, and I knew when we were down to the last day if they're going back and forth that the answer wasn't going to be good. At least I guessed that. So, was I surprised a little bit because I thought we were going along the road to a three-government agreement, but I'm not being at all critical. I think this was a tough decision to make about public health, being placed first. And when you do that, I think this is a decision that's, defensible. It's just caused the Jays to be in a bit of a jackpot now with Pittsburgh. Having said they don't want them either. And again, when you read the statistics about Pennsylvania, I mean, they've had a skyrocketing number of cases, as we're seeing all over the United States. And so they're kind of saying, look, do we need to add an additional complication of a team that's traveling around, coming into our midst and possibly being blamed for some of them getting sick? I think as much as anything else, they don't want their own people to get sick, but they also don't want, members of the Blue Jays to get sick because of all the cases they've got going on in Pittsburgh and in Pennsylvania.
Toronto Mayor John Tory here on Tim and Sid. Mayor Tory, just for the sake of some listeners and viewers, because the one thing I've read a lot is, I understand the NHL is a bubble in Toronto, but those teams are still technically coming through. They're still going through an airport of some type. There is some type of travel. So there is still some risk there. Just explain your point of view, please, to those who would have that point of view. How would you answer that?
Well, I would just say that the risk is going to be by all the protocols, and the same would have been true in baseball. For example, in baseball, one of the points that came up early on was that some of the teams were planning on traveling commercial to get to Toronto, and it was said at that time by the authorities, all the health people, provincially, federally, and city, no, you've got to come in by charter flight because then it leaves you the opportunity to come to a different part of the airport, have people literally get off the front door of the plane, grab their kit, their bag, their equipment bag, and get on the bus. And so there was no thought of people going through the airport, as it were. And so I think that I don't know how the NHL teams are arriving, but I think what they've done is put together a plan and a protocol that has them literally get off the plane and get on a bus, get on the bus and go to the bubble hotels, and they are going to be bubbled off. They've literally taken over, I think, as you guys probably know, the two hotels. and they've made some arrangements for them to be able to sort of step outside the hotel and go for a walk. Other than that, they get on the bus to go to the arena, they play their game, and they go back. And so I think the airport part is not a point of weakness on all this. I think the airport is going to be handled in such a way that they will really come into contact with nobody. And I'm told, by the way, by my son, who works for Air Canada, but he's been in the Vancouver airport and the Toronto airport, and you go there and there's nobody there. So there's not much danger you're going to run into anybody.
John Tory, the mayor of Toronto, joining us here on Tim and Sid. The NHL moved on from Vancouver because Dr. Bonnie Henry raised an eyebrow at the return to play. BC had done a wonderful job, and like many, they're struggling to keep it at wonderful job as they open more and more. But they were among the best in the world when Dr. Bonnie Henry said the plan wasn't good enough for her. Why was it not good enough for her, but Toronto and Ontario were good with the NHL's plan?
Because they went to work on saying, all right, which were the parts that people were concerned about, including what the government of British Columbia said, and they improved it. And as I recall, back in that stage of the discussions, and I wasn't personally involved, but my understanding was that the part in BC they were concerned about is what if there's a case, that happens with a player. And I think they've, through both the testing on the sort of preventative end and the what's the word I'm looking for, the kind of the identification diagnosis end, and then on the kind of the response end to what would happen if there was a case, they have put together a plan that was just improved over what was put in front of the government of British Columbia adequately to satisfy. Because I can tell you one thing, much as I'm supportive and the Premier is supportive of the hockey or baseball or any other sport coming here, none of us are going to go against the advice of our medical officers of health. And our medical officer of health, Dr. Eileen Davila, she is a bit of a sports fan, but I can tell you right now, she's not going to compromise public health for anything, and I can commend her for that, and we wouldn't go against her advice. So had she not been satisfied with the plan as amended from what was put in front of BC, then the hockey hub wouldn't be here. I can tell you that.
And even as sports fans, we agree with you.
Yeah, we do agree with you. Yeah. We do. There's some things are bigger than sports. Not many.
Yeah.
But some things are bigger than sports. John Tory joining us.
I mean, it's one of those things where it was a bit of civic pride, but, we were talking about it today and sort of saying, look, when these games are on TV, the weirdest part will be, unless you guys, pipe in crowd noise, that there's no crowd noise. But other than that, how would you really know? Like when you watch a hockey game, you maybe know if you're familiar with the board advertising, from the logo at center ice. But otherwise, I mean, how would you really know? Baseball is a bit different because the stadiums tend to look a bit different in terms of their setting and so on. But, in hockey and even basketball, aside from the logos on the floor. So, it's more a matter of civic pride that we sort of won as what I consider to be the hockey capital of the world. We won the right to have these games here, and I'm proud of that. But in the end, if it didn't happen, we'd still be able to cheer the Leafs on, and we wouldn't know the difference. I mean, they're just playing hockey and hopefully winning.
Mayor Tory, obviously the Jays' decision was high profile. Toronto FC are going to be faced with a decision soon. I am under an assumption that if the Jays couldn't get clearance federally, probably MLSC and TFC wouldn't have. Have you had any conversations with MLSC along those lines?
No, and they when they've approached me, to get advice and assistance, same with the Jays, we've helped. And so if they were to approach us with regard to TFC, we would help. I mean, the federal government, Marco Mendicino, and I believe he said this publicly as well, but he said, look, if the Jays make the playoffs, then we'll revisit this. And that doesn't mean they'll say yes. It just means they'll take another look at what the numbers are at that time. So my assumption is, with regard to TFC, depending on what unfolds after this, what do they call the tournament that's on now? They have a name.
MLS is back. MLS is back.
Yeah, that's it. So, when that's over with and depending on what's in front of everybody, the federal government will take an honest look at this. But, if the situation in the U.S. is the same and the proposed format is the same, namely that you have teams mostly from the U.S. coming and going from here all the time, I think the same issues basically present themselves. And if TFC has to be leaving town too, I mean, part of the problem with baseball was not just that you'd have teams visiting, including from hotspots in the U.S., but also that our team would be leaving town and going in some cases to at least two of the hotspots, I think, Arizona and Florida, and that they'd then be coming back, and that this just posed some risk no matter how careful you were with the daily testing and the bubbles and all that stuff. So right. I suspect the same issues will present themselves, but it'll be a different point in time. And so maybe, by the time we get there, things will be better in the U.S. or who knows? I mean, but I can tell you they'll get a fair hearing, because it's not our job, meaning all the public officials, including especially the health people, to pass instant judgment, but rather to listen to the proposal, assess the facts that are in place at that time, and make a decision. And that's what the medical people have done, and it worked out okay for the NHL, and it didn't work out so well for the Blue Jays.
I think I know the answer to this, but it's the natural follow-up. Is there any way that the Jays could revisit it with the federal government now that Pittsburgh has said no?
Look, I'm just telling you, I haven't asked them, and I wouldn't speak for them, but if you ask me to guess, I would say no, because I think the chances of the situation improving rapidly enough in the U.S., which I think is a major, major part of this, rapidly enough to cause the government to change its mind, I think would be slim, because unfortunately, look, I say this with no pleasure, the U.S. thing seems to be, in a way, sort of getting worse and not better. So I would just say, even if they had 5 rejections from their, what do they say, they have 5 plan Bs, I would say the chance of the federal government revisiting it before the playoffs, if we make it, and I've got my fingers crossed on that, I think the chances are slim.
Right. John Tory, Mayor of Toronto, here on Tim and Sid. Mayor Tory, we know you're a huge sports fan, and I just took a look at Sportsnet's schedule for the weekend, a weekend from now. And I needed a cigarette by the time I was done. It was just sports back to back to back to back.
Compared to back in, look, I enjoyed watching a lot of those classic games. Sometimes I turn on the TV and ask myself, why is this a classic game? Because it was just some random game from some time ago.
Classic game was a loosely used term at times. Yeah, but the real stuff's coming back.
There's nothing like games though where you don't know what the outcome is, and you are, in say a shortened season or a real kind of rapid fire playoff situation like we're going to face with hockey. So I think not only is the stuff going to be on there, but I think it's going to be exciting. In a best of 5 for the Leafs, every game really counts. In a 60-game baseball season, you have a losing slump of 5 games, which isn't that uncommon, and you're toast. And conversely, if you have a winning streak of 5 games. So I think every game is really, really going to count, and I think that's going to cause people to be more interested, and plus their appetite for sports, I've got to believe, is, for real, live, current sports is going to be great. So I'm looking forward to it. I think that weekend is going to be the first of many like that through the fall. It's going to be fantastic.
Well, great points you make, and when you combine all of that, Mayor Tory, there is going to be a massive temptation to get together with people for at least that weekend, if not beyond. And we are still in a space where everyone still has to be super careful. To the people listening to this in your constituents, or even outside your constituency, because you are a high-profile political figure, what's the message? Enjoy the sports, but be responsible as you do it?
You just gave the message. Enjoy the sports. You still have 10 people in your circle, so you can get together with those 10, which is still not a bad party, and have a couple of barley sandwiches and enjoy the game. Because if people just sort of start having big sports parties, then we're in trouble. That is what's causing some of the numbers to be, turning in the wrong direction a bit out west and in Ottawa, where they have gone to a sort of a more open, situation with bars open and stuff. And, I think you're going to find some of these drive-ins that are around the city are going to have some of the big games, like the opening games and some of the important games in these series in their drive-ins, because they need to have content to fill up every night. So I think you'll find there'll be some of those opportunities, so you can go and have a bit of fun. You can't have a drink because you're in the car, but you can go and have a bit of fun of those drive-ins. So, look, I just think people have to be patient, and we're going to have the sports back, which is fantastic, but we won't be able to go to the, real sports bar or go to somebody's basement and have 20 people crammed in there having a great time, because that will simply set us back, and then the sports will be canceled again. So who wants that?
Nobody. Listen, we said it at the start, and we say it again. You've been very kind with your time throughout this pandemic. We appreciate you spending some of it with us. Thanks.
I should be paying you guys to be able to talk sports. Are you kidding? It's a pleasure compared to some of the stuff I talk about all day. This is great fun.
Well, we can work on that if you want.
Sports on the radio there all the time. I used to work in radios. Do they actually pay you to do that?
It's the biggest mistake in Rogers history, but yes, Mayor Tory, yes, at some point.
I'll speak to somebody about that.
Well,
anyway,
please,
guys, thanks.
And
we'll look forward to the excitement of sports coming up over the next week or 10 days when they start up. And I guess the Jays are starting, the 29th, and the team without a home, but they'll have
Friday. Yep, Jays get going Friday. It's gonna be nuts.
Yeah, exactly.
It's gonna be nuts. Mayor Tory, we really appreciate it.
Again soon. Take care. Bye now.